Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad that you all have stayed for the wonderful presentation. I've watched many links of Irshad, and I came so excited, and I'm glad that all of you have stayed here as well.
I'm actually very surprised how many of you are not racing to catch your flights right now, so thank you. That means a lot, certainly for this conference and certainly to us.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Now, you were briefly all right, y'all, I'm on Dayquil. I'm on some serious Dayquil.
Can I use that as my excuse too?
And you can hear it, so I would love your patience with me here. There was an introduction of you, and I would love for you to give us a little bit more about you.
Sure. Well, where to begin? I think I'll begin this way. Like Richard Reeves, I'm an immigrant to this country, and I became a naturalized US citizen just this year.
Oh, wow.
And among the reasons I know that I need to and want to be living here is that the work that we do, called moral courage, is really about healing divides. And there is no other country on God's green earth. You think you know where I'm going with this, but you don't. You think I'm going to say that needs it more. Oh, no, no, no. All kinds of countries, all kinds of societies around the world need it more. But it's in this country that you can have big dreams, work hard towards those dreams, not be frowned upon for thinking too big or doing too much. In other words, there is still in this country a can-do spirit that doesn't exist in too many other places. So thank you for having me, really. Now, I know, Governor, you asked me to introduce myself, not introduce the country. I understand. Okay. So, very briefly, my team and I have launched a couple of organizations, both of which teach this thing called moral courage. Now, as you heard just up during the introductions, moral courage is not simply about speaking truth to power. Because here's the thing, I could speak truth to power like this, and boy, that'll really motivate you to hear me out, won't it? Yeah. No, it won't, just for the record, okay? Moral courage really means recognizing that power doesn't exist only out there. It also exists in here, in our primal brains, which are scanning for threats 5 times a second. And that's in the best of times. These are not the best of times when it comes to civility. So for all kinds of reasons, our primal brains are constantly amped up. And the truth that we need to speak if we want to make any kind of a difference on any issue that we care about, the truth that we need to speak is first and foremost to that brain, which is wanting us to feel defensive and stressed out and fearful when we hear disagreement with our ideas. The truth that we need to speak to it is, primal brain, I love and respect you. I know that you exist to keep me alive in moments of life and death danger. But here's the thing, primal brain. I'm not going to die right now. All that's happening is my ideas are being disagreed with. So I'm taking charge now. Step aside. I am going to listen proactively and intentionally to the people who have a different point of view than I do. Because when I do that, and this is the great payoff, I'm motivating them to want to hear more from me. So you see, folks, moral courage, speaking truth in here, even as we speak truth out there, moral courage is not about being nice, To be honest, it's not even about being civil. Moral courage is about becoming a fantastic communicator of what you believe and motivating others to hear where you're coming from because you have gone first in hearing where they're coming from. This is why in the little description that you read about today's session, it said that, moral courage allows you to both stand your ground and create common ground. And that sounds like a contradiction, but actually all it is a delicious paradox. Meaning, standing your ground is about what you believe. Creating, not seeking, not finding and leaving it up to chance. Creating common ground is about how you express what you believe. So that if you can leave your so-called other feeling respected, you have just created the foundation for getting a fair hearing of your own.
So it seems like half that skill is listening.
That's one of the skills that is part of the skill set known as moral courage. And again, I cannot be more emphatic about this. When we hear the phrase moral courage, we think, virtue. Well, yes, but it's actually a skill set. How is it that we develop moral courage? We're not born with it. It's not just a personality disposition. It's something that we can actually learn, and what that means is it's something that we can actually teach and need to. We heard the other immigrant on this stage, Richard Reeves, moments ago, talk about how much he needs to remind people that for boys to win, girls don't have to lose. Because the issue that he advocates for is not zero sum. And that is ultimately the mindset of moral courage. When you realize, and when the people whom you are engaging with realize that they don't have to lose for you to win, what that means is we can all bring our emotional defenses down, and we don't have to get into a reactionary crouch. That there's actually a reason to be listening to people with a different point of view, because I don't have all the truth. I can learn something from them. And when I learn something from them, I am incentivizing them to now want to learn something from me. It's not hard. You know what the hard part is?
What?
Remembering to do that. Because in moments of high emotion, we naturally, instinctively, impulsively, we reach for the lowest hanging fruit in terms of our habits. And if our habit is, in fact, to get, counterpunchy, that is not going to help us actually get heard, let alone solve problems.
Well, what about, in our audience, we have many elected officials, superintendents, cabinet secretaries of education, always dealing with policy for our education, and what is the idea of the moment or what is working somewhere else that we want to bring into our state.
Right.
How do you have those discussions with the teachers, the unions, the legislators, the parents, to unify them? Because you have a passion for unifying America through education.
That's right.
So how do we do that?
So there are a number of ways I can answer that question, but let me start this way. Maybe the way to start is to discuss why this is a matter of policy. Why teaching and learning moral courage is key to the future readiness, in fact, the present readiness of our kids and their families. You won't be surprised to hear that the vast majority of the work that moral courage does in education, in K-12 education, and frankly, even in higher education, is with adults. You see, teachers themselves, administrators themselves, superintendents, school board members, have never learned this skill set. And if they don't understand how they can lower their emotional defenses, they're certainly not teaching it to a new generation. Now let me answer your question another way by telling you a quick story, Governor. Not long ago, you all know the social media platform LinkedIn. It's probably the most civil platform out there, okay? And it is, for the most part, people respect the fact that when you're on LinkedIn, you talk about work, something related to work, professionalism, leadership development, and so forth, except LinkedIn reached out to me because they are really concerned about how ugly this platform is becoming now that the war in Gaza has, not just continued, but ramped up further. And they know about our work because they've been following it. And one of the things they told me is, we love the fact that you teach how to turn heated issues into healthy conversations. We love that you teach it as a set of skills, because that is the future of employment. It's not your credentials. It's not where you graduated, from college or university, if you graduated from college or university. It's what you can do for your employer right now. And so to be able to come to the employment scene knowing how to practice the skills of constructive collaboration, every employer needs that today. LinkedIn has picked up on that, and that's why we're negotiating a partnership with them.
But if, I've been introduced many a times to another legislator or another official and say, I want to introduce you to John, and John, this is Susanna. She's from John is from a red state, she's from a blue state. The two of you are never going to get along or agree to anything. And that's the introduction. So at the very beginning, your back is up.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, and how do we, I may have the skill, but how do we assure that the other person, how do we bring that down for that other person?
Right.
In the current time.
Here's how. I love your example. I didn't know that was an example you were going to bring up, if any, but let's work with this example, right? So Governor Martinez has just been introduced to, a peer from a blue state. And the introduction already assumes that you two aren't really going to get along, right? Because you've been labeled, right? And the other person has been labeled, as if that label tells you everything that you need to know about either one of these individuals. It doesn't. So one of the things, first of all, Governor, that you'll want to do as the person with these skills is take a deep breath. Really, just one breath. Deeply, though, because what that does is it gives this part of the brain time to now move to this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, where emotion and cognition, thinking and feeling can coexist rather than only being emotional, right? That's the first thing. Take that deep breath. You'll be surprised once you make it a habit how much it comes in handy. Now, here's the second equally important thing you do. You say to the blue state governor, those are just labels. Governor, I know that you are so much more than just this label. So even if we happen to disagree on the issue that we're about to discuss, I have no right to judge you based on this one discussion, because you're more than that. Could you remember the same about me? Right? Now, when you say something like that, you're not only inviting somebody to, share a culture of the conversation with you, you're literally creating rather than merely seeking common ground. Because now that's a shared rule of engagement, and one that you can always come back to if things do get a little heated or more heated than maybe you wanted to. Can I just add 3 other quick skills? And by the way, for those of you who learn best when you take notes, feel free. But you should know that by the end of our time together, you'll see on the screen a QR code that will give you access to a one-pager that not only lists these 5 core skills of moral courage, but also gives a little bit of context for each one. So you'll have it handy. Please use it and share it with others who you think really need it more than you do. The third skill is to ask a sincere question before you tell anybody where you're coming from. How does this make you feel? Why is that such a great question? Because we human beings, we are feeling creatures with the capacity to think. We are not thinking creatures with the capacity to feel. So let's start with the heart. Start easy. How does it make you feel? And by the way, maybe you already know how it makes them feel. Fine. So the next question might be, have you had a personal experience that recently that really shapes your thinking around this? When people know that you care about their lives and therefore their lived experiences, they are much more likely to care about you and where you're coming from. There's an old saying, by the way, and it's probably rooted in the Bible. No one cares how much you know, your facts, your policy prescriptions. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care about them, okay? And that's how we human beings are wired. So start with a sincere question about them. Fourth skill, now that you've asked them a question, what are you going to do?
You hope they're going to ask you how you feel.
You're way too smart for this. You're overthinking it. Now that you've asked them a question, what are you going to do? Listen. Or are you? Because we all know the distinction between listening to win and listening to understand, right? Well, I'm going to go one step further. It's easy. If I'm listening to understand you, Governor, easy for me to say, oh, yeah, I hear you. Now, about, right? And then jump into my agenda. No. It's not enough to hear you. I need to show that I'm listening to learn, not merely to understand. And I show that by saying something like, thank you. I would have never come up with that myself because I'm not you. Thank you. What you've just taught me is, and then fill in the blank. The more specific you can be, the more trust you are building, because now they know you're not here to play gotcha. Yeah? And then comes the fifth skill, which is to ask another question. It's not yet your turn. Ask another question and start it with 3 very simple words. Tell me more. That phrase, tell me more, research has shown, breaks open the honesty of a conversation because it's thoroughly inviting, it is utterly unassuming, and it telegraphs to the other person, I'm still listening. You can still trust me. You've still got the floor. And in all of this, what you are doing is reminding that person, I am not your enemy. I may be your adversary. I may be somebody whom you're ready to rumble with, but I'm not going to give you that excuse. In order to rumble effectively, be humble immediately.
And as people who are developing policies, et cetera, I mean, to ask a question simply like saying, I don't understand what you mean by that.
Yep.
Can you, to not play dumb, but to actually want to know more about,
That's right.
I don't understand that piece. How does that fit into what you've just said?
Yep.
I think then the conversation feels like, oh, she's catching on,
Yep.
and she's interested in what I have to say.
Exactly. And by the way, if you try to use this as a manipulation tactic, good luck to you. People know when they're being played. But when you use it sincerely, use any one of these skills sincerely, precisely to learn what you may be missing about where your other is coming from, that curiosity, coupled with the humility to ask, tell me more, will absolutely as I say, transform the culture of the conversation. Now you are using the power of your brain back here. Rather than caving to it, you are tempering it. And I must tell you, one delicious little fact that most historians don't even know. When the civil rights activists, Martin Luther King Jr. and activists of his generation, on the issue of civil rights, the way they eventually gained moral authority on the issue of desegregation is that they did a bunch of training before they went out into the restaurants and to the, the counters to stage their protests. The training that they did was, and this comes right out of the history of the civil rights movement, they learned, you ready for this? To educate their emotions. That was the phrase. We are learning to educate our emotions. Our emotions, which come from back here, the primal brain, want us to spit back when we are spat at, want us to lash back when, we are given that kind of treatment. They didn't. Precisely because they knew how to stand their ground and, over time, create common ground. Now, let me bring it back now to education. So one of the reasons I'm so glad you and I are having this conversation at the very end of this gathering is that so much of what the previous presenters have said figures prominently into why we need to be using these skills, even turning them into habits, in order for more of this to gain traction within our schools and our districts. Governor Bush started it all off yesterday. He talked about how these United States are rapidly becoming the disunited states of America. And you heard from Jonathan Haidt that kids no longer know how to build human relationships. You heard from Sal Khan that AI, if used well, is going to save teachers and others a lot of time. And I remember thinking as he was saying that, but to what end? What will we be using the time that we've saved? What will we be using it for? Well, then Richard Reeves talks this morning about busting out of the zero-sum mindset. And here's my proposition. If indeed we're going to be saved all this time through AI, we actually need to be using some of that time to be learning and teaching a new generation the skills of moral courage, because the unintended consequences of AI, which is on everybody's mind, but which we're not yet able to articulate, the unintended consequences will, like everything else in our society, be highly emotional. And so we've got to start learning now.
What do you mean highly emotional?
Meaning that whatever the unintended consequences are will be politicized.
Oh.
They will be politicized, and people will again, veer off into their illusory corners. And once again, we are in an us against them situation where, because one side feels humiliated by the other, the issues themselves will get lost. That's the problem, by the way, with polarization. The issues get lost. You know what takes the stage at that point? Saving face. When people feel humiliated, they're not thinking about the issue that you're doing this to them about. They're thinking about, how am I going to make that jerk feel exactly what I am feeling now? Right?
Yeah.
So the point is that we've already got major, major problems to resolve in education and of course, outside of education. And that will not change. What can change is how we respond rather than react to the need for solutions.
What's the difference between how you respond and how you react?
Reaction is impulsive. Reaction is knee-jerk. It doesn't take thought. It's actually the result of emotionalism, too much emotion. Response, think about the bigger word that comes out of the word response, responsibility. Response takes that deep breath. It takes creating common ground before deciding, I have nothing more to say to you or you to say to me. It takes the other skills that I just articulated. And that is when we literally, all of us, can take responsibility for resolving what is in front of us in big ways and small. And I bring it back again to the professional development that districts and schools bring us in to do. First and foremost, it is with teachers. Because as adults, they have not learned why this skill set is possible, and then how to turn those skills into habits so that they're easy to deploy at a time when they're needed most.
Well, how do we deal with kids? I mean, a friend of mine during this conference came up to me and says, you know, my two sons have a group of friends and they come to the house, and it's as though the adults aren't even in the room. They've had so much screen time that their relationships are developed through what they see on the screen, talking to maybe friends or people that are made up on the screen. Are they saying things about me? Are they saying nice things about me, mean things about me? So you have this freshman that's coming into high school, doesn't even know how to react to an adult, to say hello.
That's right.
You know, how are you?
I have nieces and nephews. I hear you right now.
And so and then you're going to introduce AI where they're talking to a non-human. And so we're adding a little bit more of that.
We are.
And how do we save that time and turn it into a positive to say, how do we teach those kiddos to know that there's a world out there outside of that phone?
That's right. By the way, they already know there's a world out there outside of the phone, because we're seeing them, you know, clenching their fists, punching them in the air, demanding that certain stances be taken, because obviously those are the right stances. After all, that's what their emotions are telling them, right? So it's not so much that they're not interested in being heard out in the real and messy world, it's that they don't know how to be heard. And they don't have role models in their lives to say to them, can I just let you in on a little secret? When you do this to someone, they're probably going to be, rejecting anything that comes out of your mouth, right? So let's try something else because I want you to be heard. Which is why, by the way, when we do teach kids, middle schoolers, high schoolers, our workshop is called How to Be Heard, Even by Those Who Disagree with You. Enlightened self-interest. This isn't about virtue, people. This is about becoming influential about whatever issue you are moved by, you know? I'll say one other thing. It's not enough. We all know this. It's not enough merely to attend a workshop or a conference, take feverish notes, and then decide, you got this, you're good. You wouldn't do that when you see a beautiful tennis game being played, right? You don't walk out of that stadium thinking, I can do that because I just watched it being done beautifully. You don't say that to yourself. Because you know it takes practice, practice, practice. You know that it's a skill set that went into making it look so easy. It's the exact same with moral courage, right? It takes practice, and it requires, in this case, mentorship, which is why, for the last couple of years, we have been training teachers to become mentors of these skills in their own schools. And they do it, by the way, not just for students, they do it for their fellow faculty as well. Because again, adults need to be reminded that these skills are powerful. And this year, actually 2024, but we piloted it this year, we are launching a program for teens to become moral courage mentors for their fellow teens, right? It's one thing for a teacher to say to you, here's how you can get heard. You may or may not be, somebody they can trust, but the kids will always trust their peers to teach them what really works. And keep in mind that this means student activists get to learn from their peers that the way y'all are doing your activism, you're only getting the people who already agree with you. You want to be more influential? Says the teen moral courage mentor. Let me teach you how. Which brings down the temperature. Absolutely. Right? Teaches kids emotional regulation, makes them appreciate diversity as more than just being about my skin color, your religion, or somebody else's, gender. They learn that diversity of viewpoint is part and parcel of diversity itself. So that when you have, 5 Muslims, doesn't mean they all think alike.
Right. Right.
5 Christians don't all think alike. Right?
Right.
So again, these skills have universal application, and when they are taken seriously, they can be applied, not just applied, but leveraged for all kinds of reasons and in all kinds of spheres, from policy making to actual teaching to actually what kids themselves care most about. And incidentally, I'll say one other thing. What about social media? The book that I've written anyway, Don't Label Me, how to do diversity without division. That book has a full chapter on how to use these skills on social media to become more influential on social media. So again, it's about catering to the enlightened self-interest of anyone who wants to be heard. And that includes all of you. Thank you so much for your ears.
Thank you, Irshad. It is so inviting to don't label me means a whole lot across our entire existence, and what we lose out when we do start labeling people and saying, you all are the same. Yeah. Or you are from a particular party, or from a particular set of teaching, whatever it is. I think we end up being losers when we start to label people and don't get to know them as individuals and actually have this meaningful conversation that maybe changes minds on both sides for the best product. So, Irshad, it is wonderful to have met you. It is my great pleasure to have you.
Back at you,
Thank you,
thank you, Excel and Ed. Thank you.
It's wonderful.
Thank you, Governor. Irshad, thank you so much. What I learned today was that validated something really important that we can all learn a lot more, which is curiosity is a lot better than opining. Being curious is hugely important in a world with so much uncertainty, and humility beats arrogance every day of the week. It's the sign of really effective leadership, and man, every one of our speakers was fantastic, weren't they? So we do these summits to, first of all, say you're not alone. Sometimes the education reform work gets a little lonely. There's all sorts of people that want to protect the status quo, some with good intentions, some not so good. But it's always a constant struggle, and I know it can get lonely in the States when you're doing this work and you're passionate about it. When we gather together, all of us, I hope it encourages you to go back home and realize that there's a whole lot of people doing similar kind of work all across the country, and we're making incredible progress. So thank you for being here. It's really important that you share together the passions that you believe in. And I hope you go with a real focus on making sure that we continue to empower parents, because ultimately they should be the deciders of the quality, the kind of education that their children deserve. I hope that you continue to focus on literacy and math policies that are really going to be relevant. Every child, when they graduate from 3rd grade, should be functionally literate so that they can begin to acquire knowledge. And every student, by the time they end 8th grade, should have passed Algebra 1, because that's a leading indicator of being college and/or career ready. Those are hugely important policies. I hope that you continue to work on the exciting ideas of education to workforce pathways, and that you learned, like I did during this summit, that there's lots of really exciting opportunities, and steal the great ideas like Indiana's idea that's beginning to be developed and others across the country to move to a really relevant pathway to work efforts. I hope Sal Khan got you really curious and interested in making sure that we empower teachers with these incredible tools that are available now. Imagine being a teacher now that you can have a tutor or a helper that can make you much better and relieve all of the administrative work and allow you to focus on making sure children gain a year's worth of knowledge in a year's time. We're on the precipice of the greatest time in education if we do the right things as it relates to AI, protect students, but also harness this incredible tool that's only going to be exponentially better. If Sal comes next year, I can promise you, if you were here in Salt Lake City last year and you compare the work that he talked about then compared to what he talked about now, imagine what it's going to be like next year and the year after. I think it's really important for us to listen to the experts on this and craft safe and important policies there. And I hope that you continue to work on partnerships, and I hope that you realize that Excel and Ed wants to be your humble partner to help you achieve your objectives. And with that, I hope to see you in Oklahoma City in a year. God bless you all. Thank you for coming.